Hi guys. After my pretty poor attempt at a crook knife the other day out of this coil spring, I thought I'd have another go, but this time I'd actually make something that's quite useful to me, a hoof knife. So I'm going to have a go at this same stuff. It's about, I don't know, ½ inch round coil spring. So I'm going to draw it out. I want it quite long and thin, probably about 3/4 of an inch wide by about 1/8 of an inch thick. Not quite sure how long, but we'll give it a go. That's a little bit hot, but hey ho, can't be bothered to start again. Just thinning it out. I think we need to get it hot a lot further back and get a bigger hammer. Right, let's swap hammers. Try that one. Now this is actually going to be much more useful to me, and surprisingly it's a crook knife and a hoof knife are very similar in principle. They've both got a similar shallow shape. The only difference really is that the hoof knife's got a hook on the end. That's a bit better. Give it some beans with this one. Not exactly sure how long I want it, but I might as well make it longer than I need it, really. See, that's coming down. Still want it a little bit wider and perhaps a little bit thinner, a bit more uniform. Put a step in it there. That's where I'm going to call it a day. That's about the length, so that's probably about, I don't know, 5 inches or so, maybe a little bit more. I'm getting somewhere near what I'm looking for. I'm going to narrow it down a bit, just sort of tidy it up, square it up, make it a bit more like a bit of a blank, somewhere to start from. I'm going to slightly taper down the end because that will eventually be tapered, so I might as well start it now. Trying to keep it that uniform, that 1/8 of an inch thick. That short end is going to be the blade, and the bit closest to me going to be the handle. The blade is actually going to be quite short, I think. They generally are fairly short, but I don't want to go too mad and end up a great big long blade that I can't really use. Right, back with the little hammer, I think, just to finish off. Just tidy it up. And that's going to be absolutely ample. It really is. So this little last sort of 2 inches, I suppose, I'm going to draw out, sort of put the blade edge on it, bring it, I don't know how to describe it, flatten it out anyway, taper it to one edge, that's the word I was looking for. So I want to keep one edge completely flat, like the back completely flat, and have the inside edge tapered. And you see it started to bend upwards where I was thinning out the bottom of the blade. That's not a problem because I can always bend it again the opposite way. In actual fact, I will be bending it the opposite way. just keep that back flat. You can see there, I don't know if it'll focus, I've just started to thin that last 2 inches out. Obviously I'm going to do an awful lot more of it with the grinder, but just getting the start of it by hammer. The more you can do by the hammer, obviously the less you have to do with the grinder. Just trying to thin it out a little bit more. Now I want to bend this the opposite way, but you can't see that, so I'll bend it on the anvil rather than over the beak. I can just put it over that rounded part of the anvil. First sort of 6 inches of the anvil is on the far side is rounded on purpose. So that is going to be the cutting edge, and I'm going to fold that very end up to make the hook that classic hoof knives have. I'm just going to try and tidy that top edge up, keep the back flat. I'm going to put the first bend in this, and I'm going to do it with the cross pane. Now, just trying to work out whether it's left-handed or right-handed, which way I've got to do it. I want it right-handed, so I think that's the right way to do it. You can see I put a little chalk mark where I want to bend it, but I couldn't work out whether I've done it on the right side or not. So that has almost started the bend perfectly. That's put me set in it and started the shape of the bend. So I'm just going to shape it a bit more, and then, as I say, eventually put the hook on the end. I want it a nice uniform bend, so I don't get any flats in it. I've done that. I've obviously missed that bit out, and I'm just going to grind it now with a flat disc. And so I've done a bit with the hammer. Now I'm just going to take a bit more out with the flat disc. I'll try and keep it nice and even. You don't want any sort of lumps and bumps. Actually, this flat disc isn't working very well. What's happened is it's quite an old one, and the very tip of it is worn out. So what I'm going to do, a little trick, old rasp, and that very front edge has gone, it's worn right out, so on an old rasp, turn it the wrong way around and run the flat disc up it. And what that does, it actually cuts the teeth on the rasp are cutting back through the backing plate of the flat disc, so effectively making the flat disc smaller but revealing fresh disc. So let's just get you zoomed back in again, and hopefully this time it'll work much better. That's it, because we're now on fresh grit. So that's a little trick to revive your old discs if they're worn out at the front. It doesn't last for long, but it just gives you a little bit more use out of them. Just touch up the back edge. I want to take this cutting edge, I want it quite long, I don't know if you know what I mean. I don't want a very short cutting edge. I want it tapering right from the cutting edge, almost right back to the back of the blade, or the top of the blade. You can't really see it there, but it's right from the very cutting edge right to the back. I want it a constant taper rather than going to the edge and then a little short taper on the end. Obviously there will be when the final cutting edge is put on, but I want it fairly thin right the way down to that edge. Just means that when you keep sharpening it, which inevitably a hoof knife is sharpened quite regularly, you don't suddenly come up against a fat bit, because it's quite a thin taper all the way along. I'm just going to do the back, try and get that nice and even. I want to keep the back nice and flat, because it's the inside edge I want the taper on. Again, try and keep it even. Obviously this is just the sort of the rough start, because you've got to do the hardening and tempering yet, so you don't want to muck about too much with getting it shiny or anything like that. Although it's sort of you want to get it fairly shiny so that you don't have too much to do once it's hardened and tempered, but you don't want to go too shiny to start with, spend a lot of time on it, because you'll lose it when you temper it. See there, it's quite rough, but it's starting to come up. It's a bit hot as well, but it's starting to get to a sharp edge. Alright, what I'm going to do now is just a little bit more with the air tool. You could do this with sandpaper, a bit wet and dry, but I'm just going to use the air tool because it's quick. You may notice it looks like it's already been done. It has a little bit because I started doing it, I forgot to turn the camera back on. I'm just using a very fine disc. Try and get out any real deep grinding marks from the flap disc. Obviously if you've got finer flap discs you can do it with that. Or as I say, if you've got the time you can sit and do it with wet and dry, like you would do with an ordinary knife. My short time as usual, so I'm just doing it with this. These are sort of a fibre disc. This one's been used, so it shouldn't take too much off. Just give a nice sort of satin finish. You can see there that's taken the real worst of the grinding marks out. Now I don't want to go much more than that before I heat treat, because really you're going to lose all that when you quench it in what I'm going to do in oil this time. So let's see what we can do next. Well, I'm just going to put the very hook on the end, and I'm going to use these. They're round pliers. I think they were circlip pliers originally, with bits on the end for undoing circlips which have fallen off. They're quite handy little tools, so I'm just getting the blade hot, and I'm just going to whip it round with these pliers, and that's, if it'll focus, pretty much how I want it. That's not bad at all. Can't get it to focus, but you get the idea. That's my hook on the end. Now I needed to do that first, after the initial sort of clean up, because I wouldn't be able to do it once it's hardened and tempered. I'm going to do it in oil this time. Last time I did it in water, and a couple of people mentioned that it probably would have been better to do it in oil. So I'm going to have a go in oil this time. I'm trying to get the whole lot hot. It's not very high, the fire, because I want it to get nice and evenly non-magnetic. That's just when it got to non-magnetic. There you go, drop a file in the oil. Lovely. Never mind. That'll give a nice finish to the handle. Just keep that moving. Don't just dunk it and leave it. You've got to keep it moving. This is just old engine oil, when we used to do chisel points, we used to use whale oil, which is supposed to be very good, and I don't think it's flammable like ordinary oil. Right, that should be hard now. I'm just going to rub a file across it and have a look. If you can see that is hard now. You see the finish that the oil gives it, it's like a black scale in here which needs to come off. And I'm going to take some of it off with the air tool, just so that when you do the heating, for the heat treating, you can see the colours come up. So I'm just going to get that little disc in there and just take some of the scale off. Do the same on the back. Doesn't need to be a lot, just so you've got a sort of clean surface, so you can see the colours run. So that's nice and clean now. We'll be able to see the colours running a treat on that. Alright, I'm going to do it with my little handheld gas torch, with it being very thin and sort of quite delicate. I'm going to start back on the handle because I want the heat to run from the handle up the blade, and I want to get sort of the whole lot almost uniformly hot. But as the handle's thicker, you need to start on there. Otherwise, if you started on the blade would get really hot really quickly and the handle wouldn't be. You can see already that the colours are starting to come through. It's just starting to turn down by the handle. You can see now the purples and yellows and blues coming up. I'm going to take the heat away and watch it for a minute because it will still run up without the heat being there. You can see it's still going. Just want a tiny little bit more and I think I'll call it a day at that. Yeah, see there, there's a sort of a purpley brown. I'm going to quench it at that. Get it in the oil. Keep it moving, get it nice and cool. Right, there you go. It's cooled off. Giving it a wipe and you can see the colours there. It's sort of a cross between purple and brown. And that, I think, for this job will be quite nice. Now all I've got to do is try and polish it up. And this is what I'm going to use. I've got this disc. I don't know what it is. It's a bit like a Scotch-Brite. It's quite soft. It's not hard, but it's quite aggressive and quite expensive. But it'll work on here a treat, and I've cut the handle off obviously so I can get in. This motor is from a cement mixer. Runs much faster than an ordinary motor. Normal one's about 1450 revs. This is about 2.8, so it's perfect for a polishing wheel. See how quickly that takes the scale off. And I'm not particularly pushing hard, which is good because you can do it without getting it too hot. Just try and gently descale and clean and take out any other grinding marks from before. You have to be careful that you don't catch it because that'll whip it out your hands and be smashed on the floor before you know it. Do the inside. You've got to be a bit careful again when you get towards the hook with these hook knives. I have a similar problem when I'm sharpening my hoof knives because I use this this wheel to sharpen them when they've gone really blunt. So I'm still trying to clean and sort of define the edge a bit more. That's coming up quite nice. It's taking most of the lines out. So I'm going to whip that one off and put this one on, which is basically sort of a fabric wheel, and it's pretty stiff, standard polishing mop. And these soaps, or rouges, or whatever you like to call them, all different colours, different greys. There's a grey one, brown, green, and I think the white one is for stainless. I don't know what the others are for, but they're sort of different grades. I'm going to start off with grey, because I think that's the coarsest. Just put a little dab on the wheel. Again, you have to be careful, because if this catches up, that'll be out of your hands before you know it. I did this once with a blade, nearly took my thumb off as it took it out of my hand. You can see already that's with just one pass, that's coming up pretty shiny. A little bit more, give it another go. Wipe the polish off, and again you can see that's almost mirror already, and that's just with the coarsest paste, because you can then go down finer. Ow, caught my hand on that spindle, so you've got to be careful. Just clean that up again, take the polish off. You see, that's doesn't take long, this tool. So basically that's all there is to it, the polishing side of it. You just keep at it until you've sort of got what you're after. Now I'm just going to put the final sharp edge on it, hopefully with a bit of wet and dry. Just going to wrap it in a bit of wood. Camera's playing up a bit today, not focusing very well. But I think you can see what's what. Just tear this bit of wet and dry up, just so I've got a single piece over a block of wood, and then just gently rub that edge. And it's good because where it's been polished, you can actually see where you're taking anything off. Right along the far edge. That's what I'm aiming for. It's just a nice fine final sharpen up. Obviously once it's done the first time, you keep it sort of sharpen with your regular sharpening routine, but just the first go off to get the nice first start on it. You could do this wet as it's wet and dry, but I don't think it's going to need a lot, so I'm just going to do it dry. This is a 240 grit. You could obviously go down finer if you wanted to. Obviously if you're making a posh knife, then you probably would spend a lot more time on it, go down the grits, but this is for work. This is going to be pretty much buggered in the first few days. You can, well, you can't really see, but that's coming up nice sharp edge now. You see I've taken quite a bit off the back, but the front edge is pretty sharp. I might just touch that up a little bit on the polishing wheel again without trying to touch the actual sharp part of the blade. I don't know quite what to do with the handles. I might use this bit of oak that I had off my hacksaw blade knife. Got 2 bits of that left, so I might see if I can do something with that, but I'm not really sure. Alright, so I've just given it another quick polish up, trying to avoid the actual cutting edge. You can see there's still a few marks in it, but as I say, this is for work. This is a tool for work. It's going to be, you know, although it doesn't need to be that sharp, it will cut paper, which I'm told is quite a good test. It's I say that'll be dull as anything in no time once that's been on a hoof and got dirt and mud and all sorts with it. So it's just literally just the handle to sort out now, but that's the sort of way I shall be using it. So I'll have a think, see what I can come up with. Alright, being a complete knob, I was just about to go and I've forgotten that I should have drilled some holes in here when it was soft. Of course I've hardened and tempered it now, so I can't. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to put some barbs in it, the cutting disc, just so that there's something for whatever handle I do put on it to grip to, the epoxy or whatever I decide to stick it on with. Should have something to get hold of. I ought to invest in some of those drills that you can drill files with. I was seeing them around the county shows, some bloke there drilling files and brake drums and discs off cars and all sorts of hardened materials. I'll must invest in some one of these days. But my trick with the masonry drill works quite well for most stuff, but I think this is probably the best idea for this. So there we go, just got a few barbs in it. That'll just help hold on to whatever handle I decide to put on it. So I'm going to have a think, see what I can come up with. Right, I've got a thinking out the box today. I'm going to use something completely different. I've used this stuff before. I don't think I've shown it on any of my videos except for my GoPro mouth mount, which is what I made that out of. They're thermoplastic granules, and they're literally just tiny little bits of plastic, about 3mm round, and I'm going to use those today. Just put them in hot water. I've got some on the go here. I don't quite know how much I'm going to need, but I'll put it in the pan, which I've spilt water around, and they will almost immediately become clear. And as they become clear, they become soft. Not quite sure how much I'm going to need. I think a bit more than that. Let's have a go. Because this sort of, once you squeeze it all together, it reduces in size quite a bit. And as you can see, it's almost gone clear already. Just a couple of white bits left. Doesn't take long in hot water. You don't really want to boil the water because then it gets too sticky. You just want it, I think it's somewhere over 60 degrees. And that's just about done already. So we're going to hook it out. Just wring it out sort of thing. Squeeze the water out. And you can see already the granules are all stuck together. So you just got to give it a bit of a squeege. It turns it into one solid lump. And you can mould it exactly how you like. I'm just going to wrap it around this blade. I hope I've got enough. Squidge it round. Get it right up towards the blade. I want quite a good sort of definition where the handle starts and the blade ends. And it's quite malleable for quite a long time, this stuff. It's pretty amazing stuff. I've used it for all sorts of things. As I said earlier, if you've watched my GoPro mouth mount, I made that out of this. Just moulded it to my mouth for my camera for doing some shoeing videos. I'm trying to make sure it goes into the barbs as well by squeezing it quite tightly. I don't want it to just slip off. So I'm going to put it all in the places I want it. This top edge here isn't really doing what I want it to do at the moment. It's sort of gone a bit frail, so I'm going to put it back in the water, but obviously it won't fit. So it'll get that end malleable again, but what I really want to do is get this top end. So what I think I'm going to do is put this water in a bigger pan, and that'll solve the problem. Alright, here we go. As if by magic, just chuck the whole lot in this time. It literally doesn't take long. Once that water's over 60 degrees, it takes seconds to re-soften. Just keep it moving, because if it's the bottom of the pan's a bit too hot, it will stick. So I'm going to keep it moving around a bit. I think that's gone nice and soft now. The other advantage of doing it like this is that the metal actually gets hot, the handle itself, and that helps to keep the thermoplastic soft. That's better. That top end is coming together much better now. It was starting to sort of come apart for some reason, but now that the blade's hot and reheated it, I can push it around and get it how I want it. You can see it's quite clear still, but once it cools, it goes back to white. You can just let it cool naturally, or if you want to cool it quickly, you can stick it under the cold tap. So if you were making something that you wanted to hold a shape of, you could do it and then just literally hold it under the cold tap and it goes hard. And you can reuse this stuff. So if this knife doesn't work, I can just heat it up again, pull the knife handle out and use it for something else. I think we're just about there. And that's it, cooled out. I might do a video if I can of me using it, but that is my hoof knife. Thanks for watching.